Margaret had always believed she had the perfect family. She and Robert built their life together from nothing, two kids raised with love, a modest but comfortable home, and 42 years of marriage filled with both struggles and joy. Their son Daniel was their pride. He became a successful accountant, married Victoria 5 years ago, and gave them a beautiful granddaughter named Sophie. On the surface, everything looked ideal, but Margaret noticed things. Small things at first. Victoria would make subtle comments during family dinners. "Oh, Margaret, you're cooking with butter again? Robert really should watch his cholesterol at his age. Or maybe it's time to think about downsizing this old house. It's too much work for people your age." Margaret tried to brush it off. She told herself Victoria meant well, that maybe she was just trying to help. Robert would squeeze her hand under the table, his way of saying, "Ignore it." But the comments grew sharper after Robert's cancer diagnosis 18 months ago. "Well, at least your house will help pay for the treatments," Victoria mentioned casually one Sunday. Daniel shot his wife a look, but said nothing. Margaret felt her stomach twist. During Robert's illness, Margaret discovered what real loneliness felt like, even surrounded by family. Daniel visited regularly, always bringing little Sophie. But Victoria controlled those visits like a prison. "Warden, we can't stay long, Mom," Daniel would say apologetically. "Victoria has plans for us." Margaret would watch them leave, Sophie's small hand waving from the car window, and feel a piece of her heart crack. Robert grew weaker. The cancer was aggressive. On his bad days, when Margaret would sit beside his bed holding his hand, he would talk about the future. "I'm worried about you," Robert admitted one evening, his voice barely a whisper. "I won't always be here to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Margaret asked, though somewhere deep down she knew. Robert just squeezed her hand. "I've made arrangements. Promise me you'll trust the process, no matter what happens." Margaret didn't understand what he meant. She was too focused on trying to keep him comfortable, trying to make every remaining day count. Victoria's visits during this time were strategic. She would arrive with Daniel, but her eyes would wander around the house. Margaret caught her opening drawers in the dining room once, claiming she was looking for napkins. "The napkins are in the kitchen, Victoria," Margaret said quietly. Victoria smiled that thin smile. "Of course, this old house is so confusing." 3 weeks before Robert passed, Margaret overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. She was bringing tea upstairs when she heard Victoria and Daniel talking in the hallway. "Your father has that life insurance policy," Victoria was saying. "Plus the house is worth at least $400,000, maybe more. Your mother can't manage all that alone. She need our help." "Victoria, don't!" Daniel's voice sounded pained. "I'm being practical. Someone has to be. That money could secure Sophie's future. Your mother is going to need to live somewhere smaller anyway. It just makes sense." Margaret stood frozen on the stairs, the tea tray shaking in her hands. That night, she told Robert what she'd heard. He was weak, but his jaw tightened with determination. "Call my lawyer tomorrow," he said. "Tell him it's time." Margaret didn't know what that meant, but she made the call. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, came to the house. He spent 2 hours alone with Robert. When he left, he touched Margaret's shoulder gently. "Your husband is a wise man. Trust him." 2 weeks later, Robert passed away peacefully in his sleep, Margaret holding his hand. The funeral was arranged. Quickly, Margaret moved through those days in a fog of grief. She barely noticed Victoria taking charge of the arrangements, making decisions, acting like the lady of the house, but she was about to notice everything. The funeral was held on a gray Thursday morning. The church was packed with people whose lives Robert had touched, colleagues from his 30 years at the electric company, neighbors, friends from the local Veterans Hall where he volunteered. Margaret sat in the front pew, Daniel on one side, Victoria on the other. Little Sophie sat on her father's lap, too young at 4 years old to fully understand why Grandpa was sleeping in that big box. The service was beautiful. Robert's best friend Tom gave a eulogy that had everyone in tears, sharing stories of Robert's kindness and terrible jokes. Margaret managed a small smile through her tears. As people filed past the casket for final respects, Margaret felt hollow. This was it, the end of her life as she knew it. 42 years of partnership gone. She would go home to an empty house, an empty bed, an empty life. That's when Victoria made her move. As mourners passed by offering hugs and condolences, Victoria shifted closer to Margaret. She waited until Daniel was distracted, greeting an old family friend. Then she leaned in, her mouth inches from Margaret's ear. "Now you're all alone," Victoria whispered, her voice cold and sharp as ice. "Just a lonely old woman with nothing. I hope you enjoyed playing queen of that house, because those days are over." Margaret felt the words like a physical blow. She couldn't breathe. Her vision blurred with tears, but now they weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of shock, of hurt, of betrayal, so deep it felt like drowning. Victoria pulled back, her face instantly transforming into an expression of concern for anyone watching. She even patted Margaret's hand, the perfect caring daughter-in-law. Margaret wanted to scream. She wanted to slap that false sympathy off Victoria's face. But this was her husband's funeral. She wouldn't make a scene. Robert deserved better than that. She nodded mechanically as more people offered condolences. She heard herself saying, "Thank you for coming," over and over, but she was on autopilot. Victoria's words echoed in her mind like a nightmare. Just a lonely old woman with nothing. After the service, everyone gathered in the church hall for a small reception. Margaret picked at a sandwich she couldn't taste. People shared memories of Robert, but she barely heard them. She watched Victoria work the room like a politician, playing the devoted daughter-in-law, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Daniel stood nearby looking genuinely heartbroken, holding Sophie's hand. Margaret's son was a good man just like his father, but he was blind to his wife's true nature. Or maybe he saw it and didn't know how to handle it. Either way, Margaret felt completely alone, just like Victoria had said. Then Mr. Patterson, Robert's lawyer, approached her. He was a distinguished man in his late 60s, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Margaret had met him several times over the years. Robert had always been careful about their legal documents. "Margaret," he said gently, "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Robert was a good man. Thank you," she whispered. "I know this is difficult timing, but I need to speak with you and the family." Robert left specific instructions about his will. He wanted... It read today, right after the funeral. Margaret blinked. "Today? But, I know it seems rushed, but Robert was very clear. He said it was important." Mr. Patterson's eyes were kind but serious. "Could you gather Daniel and Victoria? We can use the church office. It won't take long." Margaret nodded slowly. Something in Mr. Patterson's tone made her heart beat faster. She remembered Robert's words, "Trust the process." She found Daniel and told him about the lawyer's request. Victoria's head snapped up when she heard, "A will reading? Now?" Victoria's eyes gleamed with interest, though she tried to hide it. "Well, I suppose we should get this over with. These things are always so uncomfortable." They followed Mr. Patterson to a small office at the back of the church. It was cramped, just a desk, a few chairs, and a window overlooking the parking lot. Mr. Patterson closed the door. Margaret sat down, her hands folded in her lap. Daniel took the chair next to her. Victoria remained standing, arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp and calculating. Mr. Patterson opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. He put on his reading glasses and looked at each of them in turn. "Before we begin," he said slowly, "I want you to know that I advised Robert carefully on these decisions. Everything in this will was his choice, made with full clarity of mind and witnessed properly." Victoria's eyebrow raised. "Why would that need to be said?" Mr. Patterson smiled slightly. "You'll understand in a moment." He began to read. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and began reading from the document in his hands. His voice was steady and professional, but Margaret noticed his eyes flick toward Victoria several times. "I, Robert James Morrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The legal language washed over Margaret like white noise. She was exhausted, emotionally drained. She just wanted to go home, crawl into bed, and sleep for a week, but then Mr. Patterson's words cut through her fog. To my beloved wife Margaret, with whom I shared 42 years of love, laughter, and partnership, I leave the following. Margaret sat up straighter. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes narrowed with interest. First, the house at 427 Maple Drive, fully paid off, shall remain solely in Margaret's name. This property cannot be sold, mortgaged, or transferred without her explicit written consent, which cannot be coerced or obtained under duress. Margaret blinked. That seemed oddly specific. Why would Robert worry about coercion? Mr. Patterson continued. Second, my life insurance policy, valued at $500,000, goes entirely to Margaret. Additionally, my pension benefits, savings accounts, and investment portfolio totaling approximately $370,000 are to be transferred to Margaret's sole control. Margaret's mouth fell open. She had no idea they had that much saved. Robert handled their finances, always assuring her they were doing fine. This was more than fine. This was security beyond anything she'd imagined. Victoria's face had gone pale, then flushed red. Her hands gripped the back of Daniel's chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. There must be some mistake, Victoria interrupted, her voice tight. What about Daniel? What about his inheritance? Mr. Patterson looked at her over his glasses. I'm getting to that. Please let me finish. He returned to the document. To my son Daniel, I leave my collection of woodworking tools, my fishing gear, and my 1967 Chevrolet Camaro, which we restored together. These items represent our time together and the memories we built. I also establish a trust fund of $50,000 for my granddaughter Sophie's education, to be administered by my wife Margaret until Sophie turns 18. Daniel's eyes were wet with tears. He didn't care about the money. The car and tools meant everything to him. Those represented his father's love, but Victoria looked like she might explode. That's it? She hissed. Tools and an old car? What about us? What about our future? We have expenses, a child to raise. Victoria, Daniel said quietly, his voice strained with embarrassment, but Mr. Patterson held up his hand. There's more. Robert included a letter to be read as part of the will. He wanted everyone present to hear it. He pulled out a separate piece of paper, this one in Robert's own handwriting. Margaret recognized it immediately. Tears sprang too. Her eyes. Mr. Patterson read, If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry I can't be there to protect the people I love. But I can still protect them from beyond, and that's what this will is designed to do. Margaret, my love, you gave me the best years of my life. You stood by me through poverty, through raising our kids, through my illness. You never complained, never asked for anything. This money isn't a gift. You earned every penny of it through your love and sacrifice. You deserve to live your remaining years in peace and security. No one can take that from you now. Margaret was crying openly now. Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand. Mr. Patterson continued reading Robert's words. Daniel, my son, I love you more than you'll ever know. The tools and the car aren't just objects, they're reminders of who you are at your core. A good man, a loving father, a hard worker. You don't need my money. You have your own successful career. What you need is to remember the values I tried to teach you and to stand up for those values even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Victoria's face had turned to stone. She knew what was coming next. Now, I want to address why certain decisions were made in this will. Over the past few years, I've witnessed behaviors that concern me deeply. I've watched someone in this family treat my wife with disrespect, make cruel comments, and show interest in our assets, rather than our well-being. The room was dead silent except for Mr. Patterson's voice. I've heard conversations I wasn't meant to hear. I've seen the way my wife's smile faded after certain visits. I've noticed who asks about money and property and who asks about feelings. And health. Victoria stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. I don't have to listen to this character assassination. Sit down, Mr. Patterson said firmly. or you'll leave this office without hearing the condition that directly affects you." Victoria froze. Condition? Victoria slowly sank back against the wall, her arms crossed defensively. Her face was a mask of barely controlled rage, but her eyes betrayed something else, fear. Mr. Patterson adjusted his glasses and continued reading Robert's letter. "I'm not a vengeful man, and this will isn't about punishment. It's about protection. It's about making sure that Margaret, who gave up her own career to raise our children and support my dreams, is never made to feel small or disposable." Margaret's throat tightened. Robert had noticed everything. All those little comments she'd tried to brush off, all those moments when she'd felt diminished. He had seen it all and been quietly building a shield around her. The lawyer read on. "However, I believe in family. I believe in redemption. So, I'm including one additional provision. There is a separate investment account containing $100,000. This account will be given to Daniel and Victoria on the following condition. Victoria must write a sincere letter of apology to Margaret, acknowledging the hurt she's caused and committing to treat her with genuine respect and kindness going forward. This letter must be written within 30 days of my death. Margaret will be the sole judge of whether the apology is sincere. If she accepts it, the money is yours. If not, the full amount goes to charity in Margaret's name." The room erupted. "Are you kidding me?" Victoria's voice was shrill with fury. "This is manipulation. This is blackmail." "It's a condition of inheritance," Mr. Patterson said calmly. "Perfectly legal. Robert had every right to distribute his estate as he saw fit." "I won't do it," Victoria spat. "I won't be forced to grovel for money that should be my husband's by right." "It's not your husband's by right," Mr. Patterson corrected. "Nothing is anyone's by right in an inheritance. It's a gift from the deceased, distributed according to their wishes." Daniel had been sitting silently, his head in his hands. Now, he looked up, and Margaret was shocked to see anger in his eyes, but it wasn't directed at his father or her. "Victoria," he said quietly, "you whispered something to my mother at Dad's casket. I saw you. What did you say?" Victoria's eyes widened. I was just comforting her. Don't lie to me." Daniel stood up, his voice cracking. "Not today. Not at my father's funeral. What did you say to her?" Margaret spoke for the first time since the reading began. Her voice was soft but clear. "She told me I was all alone now, just a lonely old woman with nothing." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Daniel's face went white, then red. He turned to his wife with an expression Margaret had never seen before, pure betrayal. "How could you?" he whispered. "She's twisting it," Victoria said desperately. "I didn't mean it like that. I just meant—" "Stop." Daniel's voice was hard now. "Just stop. All this time, Mom tried to tell me about the little comments, the looks, the subtle digs. I defended you. I said she was being too sensitive, but Dad saw it. Dad knew." He turned to Margaret, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have listened." Margaret stood and pulled her son into a hug. "You're a good man, sweetheart, just like your father. You see the best in people. That's not a flaw. But I was blind. You were loyal to your wife? There's nothing wrong with that." She pulled back and looked him in the eyes. "But your father was loyal to me, and he made sure I'd be okay." Victoria was shaking. Now, whether from rage or fear, Margaret couldn't tell. "Fine, you want an apology? I'll write you a damn apology. Just tell me what words you want to hear, and I'll write them down." "That's not how it works," Mr. Patterson interjected. "The letter must be sincere. Margaret will know the difference." "And Victoria, I should mention one more thing," Robert specified. "If you attempt to coerce Margaret into accepting an insincere apology, or if you make any threats or attempt to manipulate the situation, the entire $100,000 goes to charity immediately, and you'll be barred from any future considerations in Margaret's own will." "My own will?" Margaret looked surprised. "Yes, Robert left you with substantial assets. You'll need to make your own estate plans now. Who you choose to include in those plans or exclude is entirely up to you." The implication sank in. Victoria had just realized that her cruel whisper had cost her not just $100,000 now, but potentially much more in the future. This isn't over, Victoria said, grabbing her purse. You'll hear from my lawyer. Feel free, Mr. Patterson said mildly. This will was prepared meticulously. It will stand up to any challenge, Victoria stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Daniel stood awkwardly, torn between following his wife and staying with his mother. Go, Margaret said gently. She's your wife? You have a daughter together? Go home, Mom, I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything yet. Just ... Think about what your father wrote. About standing up for values even when it's difficult. Daniel kissed her forehead and left. Margaret drove home in a daze. The house felt impossibly empty when she walked. Through the door, Robert's jacket still hung on the coat rack. His reading glasses sat on the coffee table next to his favorite chair. She collapsed on the couch, and finally let herself fall apart. She cried for her husband, for the years they'd never have together, for the grandchildren she might never get to know properly. She cried for the family that was fracturing before her eyes, but beneath the grief, something else was growing, a strange, unexpected sense of relief. Robert had seen her. Really seen her? All those times she'd questioned herself, wondering if she was being too sensitive or imagining slights he'd witnessed them too. He'd validated her feelings even after death. Over the next week, Margaret began to understand the magnitude of what Robert had done for her. She met with Mr. Patterson again to go over the financial details. With the house paid off and nearly $1 million in assets, she would never have to worry about money again. Robert was very clever, Mr. Patterson explained. Everything is structured to protect you. The house can't be taken from you. The money is in accounts that only you can access. He even set up a small monthly fund for household maintenance and repairs, so you'll never feel the burden of home ownership. He thought of everything, Margaret whispered. He spent months planning this. He wanted to make sure you felt secure, not smothered. You have freedom now, Margaret. The freedom to live your life however you choose. But Margaret wasn't thinking about freedom. She was thinking about Sophie, her granddaughter. About Daniel, who called every day but sounded exhausted and sad. About the family gatherings that would never be the same. 10 days after the funeral, Daniel came to visit alone. He looked terrible dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled. Mom, can we talk? They sat in the kitchen, the same table where they'd shared thousands of meals as a family. Margaret made coffee and they sat in silence for a moment. Victoria hasn't written the letter, Daniel finally said. She refuses. She says Dad's will was a manipulation, that she shouldn't have to humiliate herself for money. It's not about the money, Margaret said quietly. Your father knew that. It was about respect. About whether she could acknowledge the hurt she caused. I know. Daniel rubbed his face. Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About things I've ignored, conversations I've dismissed. You tried to tell me, didn't you, about how she treated you? Margaret reached across and took his hand. You love her. You wanted to believe the best of her. There's nothing wrong with that. But I chose wrong. I chose wrong every time I told you that. You were overreacting, that Victoria didn't mean it that way. I chose her comfort over your dignity, his voice cracked. Dad would be so disappointed in me. No, Margaret said firmly. Your father loved you more than anything. He didn't create that condition to punish Victoria or test you. He did it too. Protect me and to give Victoria a chance to make things right. She can still write that letter. She can still choose kindness. She won't. I know her now, really know her, and she won't do it. She's too proud, too angry. She thinks Dad humiliated her on purpose. Daniel looked at his mother with devastating clarity in his eyes. I've been sleeping in the guest room for the past week. We barely speak except about Sophie. I don't know what to do. I love my daughter. I love my wife somewhere under all this anger. But I can't unsee what Dad showed me. I can't unhear that whisper you told me about. Margaret felt her heart break for her son. Daniel, whatever you decide about your marriage, I will support you. But don't make any big decisions while you're grieving. Give it time. Will you let me bring Sophie to visit? Just me and her? Of course. Sweetheart, you never need permission to come home. Over the next 3 weeks, Daniel came by twice a week with Sophie. They'd bake cookies, work in the garden, read stories. Margaret cherished those moments, watching her son slowly heal, watching her granddaughter's laughter fill the house again, but Victoria never came, and the letter never arrived. On day 28 of the 30-day deadline, Margaret received a phone call. It was Victoria. "I'll write your letter," she said coldly. "But only because Daniel is making our life miserable over this. You'll get your precious apology. Victoria, just don't. I'll email it to your lawyer tomorrow." She hung up. The next morning, Mr. Patterson called. "Margaret, I've received a document from Victoria. Technically, it's a letter of apology. I'm going to read it to you, but I want you to remember, you're the only one who can judge if it's sincere." He began reading. "Dear Margaret, I apologize. If my words at the funeral hurt your feelings, that was not my intention. I hope we can move past this situation and access the funds that Robert set aside, which would greatly benefit our family and your granddaughter's future. Sincerely, Victoria." Silence hung on the line. Margaret stared out her kitchen window at the garden she and Robert had planted together 20 years ago. The roses were blooming, Robert's favorite yellows and her beloved reds, intertwined on the trellis he'd built. "Margaret?" Mr. Patterson's voice came through the phone. "Are you still there?" "I'm here," she said softly. "I'm just thinking." "You don't have to decide right now. You have 48 hours from receipt of the letter to make your determination." "I already know my answer." Margaret said. "The letter Victoria sent wasn't an apology at all. It was a transaction. I apologize if my words hurt your feelings," as if Margaret's hurt was merely a misunderstanding. Not my intention, avoiding any admission of what she'd actually done, and then immediately mentioning the money and Sophie's future, as if holding her granddaughter's well-being hostage. "Mr. Patterson, my answer is no. The letter is not sincere. Please transfer the $100,000 to—" She paused, thinking, "to the local women's shelter. The one on 4th Street? They help women who are rebuilding their lives after loss." She could hear the smile in Mr. Patterson's voice. "Robert said you'd make the right choice, whatever that was. I'll process the donation today." After she hung up, Margaret sat for a long time. She felt sad, but also strangely at peace. Robert had given her something more valuable than money. He'd given her the power to set boundaries, to demand respect, to choose dignity over family obligation. An hour later, Daniel called. She could hear it in his voice before he said anything. Victoria had told him, "Mom, I just... Victoria said you rejected her letter." "I did. She's furious. She says you're punishing her, that you're tearing our family apart." Margaret took a deep breath. "Daniel, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. I didn't tear anything apart. Victoria's words at your father's funeral, all the comments over the years, her inability to show genuine remorse, those things created this situation. Your father's will didn't create a problem. It revealed one that already existed." "I know," he whispered. "God, Mom, I know that now. I love you more than anything. You and Sophie are my world. But I won't accept a false apology just to keep peace. Your father taught me that I deserve better, and he was right." There was a long pause. Then Daniel said something that shocked her. "Good." "What? Good? You deserve better?" "You've always deserved better." His voice got stronger. "Mom, I've made a decision. I'm not divorcing Victoria. She's Sophie's mother, and I believe in trying to work through problems. But I've told her we're going to marriage counseling, and she needs to really examine why she treats people the way she does. If she refuses, then I'll have to make harder choices." Margaret felt tears on her cheeks. "Your father would be so proud of you. I'm coming over this weekend with Sophie. Every weekend from now on, actually. Victoria can come if she wants, but she needs to understand that you're my mother. This is your home, and respect isn't optional anymore." That Saturday, Daniel arrived with Sophie. Victoria wasn't with them. Sophie ran into her grandmother's arms, chattering about preschool and her new favorite dinosaur. They spent the afternoon in the garden. Daniel worked on fixing the trellis while Margaret and Sophie planted new flowers. It felt healing, this simple act of growing something together. As the sun began to set, Daniel sat beside Margaret on the porch swing Robert had built decades ago. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Victoria and I are separated. Just temporarily, she's staying with her sister. We're both seeing counselors individually, and we'll try couples counseling next month. I don't know what's going to happen." Margaret squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens, you're being brave. You're doing what's right for everyone, including Sophie." Dad knew, didn't he? He knew this was all going to fall apart. I think your father hoped it wouldn't have to. He gave Victoria a chance to change, to grow. She didn't take it, but the opportunity was there. 3 months later, Margaret's life had found a new rhythm. Daniel and Sophie visited every weekend. Margaret had joined a book club and a gardening society. She took a painting class, something she'd always wanted to do but never had time for. The money Robert left her wasn't just financial security. It was freedom to discover who she was beyond being a wife and mother. Victoria did eventually write a second letter, longer, rawer, more honest. She admitted her jealousy of the close relationship Margaret and Daniel shared. She confessed that her own mother had been cold and critical, and somewhere along the way, she'd become the same thing. She said she was in therapy, working on herself, and while she couldn't take back the hurtful things she'd said, she wanted to try to be better. Margaret read the letter 3 times. Then she picked up the phone. "Victoria? It's Margaret. I got your letter. Would you like to come to Sunday dinner? Just family. We can start over if you'd like." There was crying on the other end of the line. "I'd like that very much." As Margaret hung up, she looked at Robert's photo on the mantel. He smiled at her from the frame. Forever 58. Forever the man who'd loved her enough to protect her even after death. "Thank you," she whispered to him, "for seeing me, for valuing me, for teaching our son what real love looks like." The house wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility, full of boundaries respected, full of love that had to be earned and not just assumed. Margaret wasn't just a lonely old woman with nothing, as Victoria had whispered. She was a woman who'd been married to someone who loved her enough to give her everything she needed, not just money, but dignity, choice, and the power to demand respect. And that, she realized, was the greatest inheritance of all.